At one point, it was all about just flashy unis, but the winning caught up quickly after that. And obviously, it's been a long tradition there at Oregon, and people take notice when you're a non-traditional program and you can reach the elite as they have in the past 10 years. And now, boom, after a little bit of a lull, they are back as Pac-12 and Rose Bowl champions. Talking Oregon football here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We are so happy to be joined by Ryan Winters of 503 Sports. We also have James Vose on the line from Autzen Zoo, who's joined us a few times this past season. Boys, how you doing tonight?
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark.
Appreciate you
well.
guys.
Couldn't be better.
Yeah, taking some time out with us to talk some Oregon football. They wanted to take over tonight and talk basketball. It was out of control before we recorded, but we got them laser focused now. I hope we shall see. So, Ryan, I'm going to pitch it to you first and would like to remind everyone in the live chat room, of course, you talk your college football. All fan bases are welcome and talk it up. But we are going to focus on Oregon football, so simply leave your comments and your questions. I'll pass them along to Ryan and James, and who knows, I may have an opinion or two as well. But Ryan, since we've talked to James a few times late in the season, and I believe once or twice since the Rose Bowl victory, and haven't had you on for quite a while, I'm sure that run to the Roses, Pac-12 championship, a great Rose Bowl game in which he pulled out 28-27, finished top 5 in the nation. That had to be just about as good as it could get for this year. You got to be feeling really good.
Yeah. I mean, it ended how it's supposed to end, from our end. I felt like that Auburn game, it was all the buzz was about that game. And the way that they lost that game, that your next objective was to just win the Rose Bowl. And I thought they were in it for a little bit with the national discussion of being in the conversation. And I was very happy. My family, we all went to it. And it's just a great event to go to. It's kind of like a Woodstock event for all the Duck fans. And I've gone to all the Rose Bowls that I've been able to go to in my lifetime. I feel at this point in my life, it would take a miracle for having me not go to one of them. So just a very special event. And then to have a real game breakout. And a lot of people were kind of commenting after the game, like, oh, I'm so sorry. It wasn't that great of a game. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, do you watch football? Like, went right down to the wire. And a lot of good Wisconsin fans. And to play the same way we kind of played in that previous one against Russell Wilson, where it went right down to the wire. Super exciting game and just a beautiful setting. And then next year looks really good too. You're bringing in these great recruiting classes. As a Duck fan growing up in the 80s and 90s, we're not used to this kind of like recruiting business, being so popular right now and getting heavyweight recruits coming in. And we were just talking before the show, James and I, about loss of Dante Williams, a really big recruiter. And, it's just that becomes kind of the main story now. And that's when you're kind of at the upper echelon of college football right now. So it says it by winning, obviously, the Pac-12 and by winning the Rose Bowl, but it also says it in bringing in recruits and still staying positive in a very remote place. I mean, we're talking way out. We're on the West Coast. We're way up in the Northwest. Eugene is remote. Eugene's 2 hours from Portland. It's removed. So I think they're doing a heck of a job.
I pay attention, Ryan. You're not that remote. I'm watching those games at 1:30 in the morning here on the East Coast. I'm tracking Pac-12 football, and obviously you guys are a main player. And the way I look at it is, from a traditional standpoint, obviously USC is USC. But here in recent years, Washington's probably been the best program for the past 3 or 4 years, but Chris Peterson now stepping away. 2 consecutive top recruiting classes at Oregon, tops in the Pac-12, top 10 in the nation. Mario Cristobal off to a great start. It just appears now that you're on the verge of clearly being the best program in the Pac-12, James.
Yeah, to Ryan's point, what we were talking about, the hot news just a few short hours ago, Dante Williams being swept away to Hollywood in Los Angeles, and Clay Helton and his staff are really gaining a huge recruiter, a huge asset, pretty good cornerbacks coach, insanely talented recruiter, noticed across the country and especially throughout the conference as probably the best recruiter in the Pac-12. And luckily, if there are some silver linings here, it's after A lot of the letters of intent have been signed, especially for this 2020 class. 2021 may be a different story, but it's not entirely clear what might be the effect or the fallout of the Dante Williams change. But to Ryan's other point and to Mark's point about the history at USC and the present at USC, it seems like they're annually wondering whether or not their head coach is going to be fired, and annually wondering how to throw duct tape over all these different holes that are in the hull of their boat, and trying to stop the sinking a little bit. And they've had high-level recruiting for the last 10 years, and they don't have the results that high-level recruiting, especially USC-level recruiting, should turn into. And they're just, it's clearly more than recruiting, and Dante Williams will surely be able to sell that program no matter in what sort of disarray that it's in right now. And he's a Southern California guy, but there's something that Oregon has, and that a lot of other teams in the Pac-12 have that USC doesn't, and that seems to be a level of coaching and a level of in-game development or in-season development, off-season development that actually leads to wins beyond just wins on the recruiting board.
Yeah, we can lump in a USC with a Texas, a few other programs across the country where the recruiting rankings look awfully impressive, but it hasn't come into fruition. USC, I was just looking at the recruiting rankings the other day, doing a USC Live. 3 consecutive top 10 classes are on the roster right now, and 2 of those ranked at number 4 in the country, and it's producing 7 and 5 loss seasons the last 2 years. Let's get back to Oregon, Ryan. Mario Cristobal at FIU in 6 years. He did a nice job. Difficult situation to win there. Otherwise, he has been an assistant coach. This is his first big-time job. What really impresses you about this guy? Why is he so good?
Well, personally, when you stand next to the guy, he has a very wonderful presence about him. I grew up an athlete. I'm 6'2", 240. I stand next to him. He's just a little bit taller than me, just much, much stronger than me, obviously. But I've said to him on numerous occasions, man, I've never had a coach I've ever interacted with make me want to hit the weight room as much as him. Like, his presence makes me want to lift weights. And I feel like when you're an 18-year-old kid and you're going to play football, half your job is to lift weights. The other half is to go and play and run around and make tackles or make offensive plays or whatever. But your job in the weight room is really, really important. And the strength and conditioning staff always has a very unique relationship with these athletes. So not only has Cristobal kind of built kind of a family structure there, but he's also really delegated well. He's given power up to all these other guys to kind of run their thing. And then he goes and works with the offensive line. I mean, this guy's a real offensive line coach at heart. He's still an assistant, basically. He's just running a crew with everybody else. He's very humble in these interactions. I've had some really funny interactions with him just at these different duck events or different dinners that you have or whatever, being a season ticket holder or whatever. And he's just like a regular guy. The guy just walks through the crowd like nothing. And everybody wants to get a piece of his attention. Everybody wants to be a part of it. You can tell he just has a kind of a glow to him, and then he's a straight ahead football coach. I think, we've really leaned in the era of kind of looking at the numbers, and what do the numbers say? Analytics has kind of really driven everything in baseball, in basketball. All the different sports have changed a little bit. Cristobal kind of represents what Bo Schembechler liked about football. Like, he still represents kind of like what the 70s and 80s football is, which is still, you got to move people. The strong man wins in his mind. You got to move people off the ball, and he's not afraid to do that. And he's had numerous 4th down chances where he's just put the ball in the guy's hand and just run the ball. And I think that's really rewarding right now as a classic football fan. There was a time at Oregon where we had to kind of do the opposite. We almost had to kind of run a Princeton offense because we didn't really be able to match up strength on strength with USC when USC was really rolling Reggie Bush and all those guys. We had to kind of take the 2-3 star guys and build them up, or take some different sort of offensive structures or whatever. And now I feel like they're just running straight ahead power, and they're just daring people to stop them. And they're not afraid to punt either. They're not afraid to get in a game that's slow motion. And that might not be that exciting, but I don't think that's necessarily all the offensive coordinator. I think you'll see the new offensive coordinator. They'll have similar type of vibe. So he's just a great guy. He's a good family man. And I think one of the questions you said earlier, started to dominate here. One of the questions you said earlier was, what does this relate us to? Or what does it remind me of? And it reminds me kind of the early Mike Bellotti days. The early Mike Bellotti days was a day where you felt like he was going to stay here for a while. I don't think he's going anywhere. And they talked about, oh, Miami's going to take him or something. Why would you leave? I mean, he's got basically the world as his oyster. He's got the staff that he wants. He's got results. He's got people supporting him, and he has a great time. We see him at basketball games and see him with his family, and so I think he's very connected. So we're just really, really happy with him. What do you think, James?
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I know that there were times in the Chip era when we were doing that. Let's do 3 stars. Let's run a different kind of offense, a whole different kind of offense that changed football at every level. The way that Chip implemented it, absolutely. But he also wasn't sitting courtside at basketball games. He didn't have he didn't feel as integrated in the community or with the press, especially. But that was Chip being Chip, and we knew what we were getting with that. And Bellotti, especially early on, I am basically like, this all research early on Bellotti of my understanding of his history and his time, but I know he came from UC Davis, and so it wasn't like he was being lured back in the way that Cristobal might be lured back to Miami, which is certainly a possibility. I understand, but I think there's still like 3 or 4 more at least really great years with Mario, and if he were to turn in 3 more years of incredible football, of a couple 10-win seasons, maybe even a shot at the big one, I would not blame him one bit for wanting to go back to Miami, because I know personally, if I was in his position coaching at Miami and I was lured back to Oregon, I would say, thank you so much for this opportunity, but I would find myself back in Eugene in a heartbeat. And I understand what that means to a person. And that's why, other than the way that it happened and the way that it unfolded and the miscommunications and the non-yeses and the non-nos, I didn't always believe that Willie Taggart was in the wrong for going back to Florida State. That's his family. That's his home state. I understand pursuing your dream job. I probably would have said thank you a little deeper and been a little more thoughtful in the way that I was going to leave the place that gave me the shot. But I think Mario is a whole nother beast, a whole nother man, a whole nother man of character and a man of Oregon. And we've adopted him as such, and he has exceeded expectations, surely. But I'm quite excited to see what else he's got in store for us, because I think he's got a little bit more for us.
Ryan brings up an interesting aspect in this, in that what the stereotype for Oregon is that you've got a bunch of quick little guys out in space, and you recruit and run out there a lot of thin, lanky offensive linemen that run about 260. And that's the kind of offense, and you're up tempo, and that still lingers out there. And unless people really honed in on Mario Cristobal's program there and the elite offensive line that you put on the field from a talent and a brute force standpoint, that this was a dominant offensive line this past year, and the strength of the team, that we still think of Oregon as flashy uniforms, therefore flashy offense and speed only. And we really can't muscle up and play. And then some people got a rude awakening in watching Wisconsin, a Big Ten team and a very good team, match up against Oregon. And you couldn't really, if they would have switched uniforms, we wouldn't necessarily have known who was who. They could both, there were 2 physical football teams on that field. And that's what Mario Cristobal is brought, is diversity, because obviously the elite teams, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States, they're both. They're extremely fleet athletically, but they're also very strong, tough teams. And that's what you got to have if you're going to compete for national championships.
Oh yeah, we'll see it next year, man. When Ohio State comes out, they're the real deal. And those teams on the next level, they're elite for a reason.
We've got a question here from Nate Kingston, who's asking, of course, Justin Herbert, a national star, one of the most recognizable names and faces and stories here recently in college football, moves on to the NFL. People will be wondering, okay, what is the Oregon quarterback situation look like for 2020?
James, take this one.
Yep, I got that. Tyler Shough, he's going to be a redshirt sophomore this upcoming season. He was a redshirt freshman, and then last year's redshirt freshman again because he had a redshirt season. But he's been learning so much underneath Herbert and just through Arroyo. I know he's not going to be there anymore, but Arroyo's philosophy, as Ryan noted, may not have always just been an Arroyo's philosophy. It may be pretty similar in different ways to what ends up being run through under Joe Moorhead, because I think it's mostly Cristobal's philosophy. But I think Tyler Shough is one of the most experienced first-year starters I think we'll see in college football. It's invaluable that you have that 2 years of practice and learning and film time, especially as a field general, like beyond any other position. It's valuable, certainly if you're a wide receiver or a cornerback, to have that kind of waiting time. But quarterback obviously has to be the one where you're the mentally you're the sharpest, and he's going to have to be, because Oregon starts the season with North Dakota State and then Ohio State, two teams that are not slouches in any way, shape, or form. They'll be in Autzen Stadium, so Shough will have the home crowd with him. But Tyler Shough, who has thrown it, he throws the ball well. He's mobile. He gets out and blocks against USC when he's in garbage time, and he lays guys on their backs. He is an exciting player. I think there's been certainly a lot of talk about some new incoming recruits at quarterback. Robbie Ashford being one of the nation's top dual threat quarterbacks. He was originally slated to go to Ole Miss, and then near the last second in the early signing period, he switched over to Oregon, and that's certainly exciting. I would love to see what he can do and what he can learn, but I think Tyler Shough is that guy, at least for right now. There's no reason to think otherwise, why he wouldn't be that leader, why he wouldn't be certainly a fitting replacement for Justin Herbert. And I know those are big shoes to fill, but he certainly seems like the right guy to do it.
Taylor Walston with his comment, you must include Oklahoma in the conversation when you mention elite. Anything other is disrespectful. All right, Taylor. All right.
Well, I agree with that. I agree with that.
Well,
I would say Oklahoma.
Yeah,
I would say Oklahoma finds herself in a tough position right now because they're coming off of these losses, these consecutive losses, similar to how Oregon kind of caught this notion of they can't win the big one. And until you do it, you're going to have to kind of break that cycle a little bit. And people might tire of the Big 12 a little bit and might look for a Texas, like you said, Mark, or a Baylor or somebody else who's willing to be that next champion, to be that person who they would, or to be that team they'd rather pick. I respect the heck out of Oklahoma, but as soon as I saw that schooner fall down, I was like, there's a bad omen, man, in that game, that preseason thing or pregame thing. So much respect to the Sooners, but they're kind of in a tough spot right now.
Well, my first counterpoint to that comment is simply going to be that, number one, I wasn't making an all-inclusive list of elite programs when I was talking about Oregon, when I said Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson. Those are the first three that roll off the tongue. I wasn't saying this is an exclusive, inclusive list of everyone. Number two, sorry, Taylor, I don't consider Oklahoma. I consider them elite from the standpoint of a program, a brand. But this particular roster is not Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, and now LSU, and we'll see if that continues there. That's simply my opinion. We all have one, and there you go. All right, we'll stay on with Oregon here. The other kind of calling card for this program, as it reached elite status under, I'll use that term, certainly under Chip Kelly. These numbers come to mind: 33-3 in the Pac-12 under Chip Kelly, 46-7. Time and time again, basically a top 5 program in the country. So they were elite, certainly for that 4 or 5 year stretch. Was the arms race of facilities across the country almost started with Oregon. You guys were the first to really say, where there were, segments and mini docs being produced to say, look at this football facility. We got to tour this thing and show it off. I would think that for the most part, based on what I've heard, obviously the other schools have countered, but does that continue to be a main thrust in the recruiting efforts there?
I I think like we were saying earlier, you know, Oregon is fairly remote, and to get kids out, you got to do something. And it started right when we talked about Mike Bellotti, and right after that Cotton Bowl loss, you know, Phil asked him, "What can I do? You know, what can we do as donors?" Because it's not just Phil. You know, all those buildings are named after other people. There's other money in Oregon. There's just not just Phil, but Phil's like, "What can we do?" And Bellotti said, "We need an indoor practice facility." They built the Shough Center. And then it started building from there. And that's really where this kind of like idea of the arms race started in my mind. And we had seen other places doing this. We'd seen places in the South doing this, other locker rooms and stuff. You know, they did multiple locker rooms before this new thing. Then they kind of got known for the locker room thing a little bit early when the locker room was still in the Casanova Center. And then they kind of just expanded. They rebuilt Autzen, and that helped for the, time being. And they just kind of stayed with the Joneses a little bit. And when they built the new center, they went to the next level. I mean, literally the LeBron James building and the Howland Down complex are basically just like the same type of building. They are unbelievable. When you walk through those halls and look at the size and scope of those buildings, they're pretty insane. And to see the changes on MLK Boulevard from my lifetime when I used to go to the Elks Club and swim there, and the parking structure and everything else changed, and baseball stadiums there, and softball or soccer and everything else around. It's amazing what Oregon has done in this time frame, and it shows because Oregon, not only in football but in many other sports, are very competitive in the Pac-12.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Talking Oregon football, James, certainly, if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, I do. Ryan, it's funny you mentioned the Elks Club. My parents actually had their wedding reception there.
Let's go.
It's clearly, and even in my 4 years at Oregon, not too long ago, seeing all the different high-rise apartments pop up in places all along Franklin, and seeing the way that Eugene's slowly but surely gaining a skyline. It's changing in a lot of ways, and it's certainly easily pointed back to that one meeting post Cotton Bowl between Mike Bellotti and Phil Knight, and it was what do you need? And it's an incredible little story, and it was a slow burn, and there were problems along the way with that relationship. It wasn't always perfect, and it isn't just Phil, to Ryan's point. But I totally understand why there's that stigma from especially some rival schools. Some would say lesser schools. I wouldn't say lesser schools. Some would say lesser schools that may chalk up Oregon to, oh, it's Uncle Phil money. It's the University of Nike. And that's just fine. I think there's a lot of reasons to be proud of that. It's a university that produced most of the people that started Nike and most of the people that brought it off the ground. And I think there's certainly a lot of ways in which that's the support is homegrown. It's not just kind of slapped on. It's the same reason that all the Jordan uniforms at North Carolina make sense. And it's the same reason that Phil contributes a good amount of money to Stanford as well, because that's his school too. And I think there's a lot of reasons to, and Tim Cook at Auburn donating money there. I think there's a lot of reason to be proud. And I know some Duck fans are just really graded by Oregon State fans in different mentions saying, "Oh, University of Nike" and all that fun stuff. But I see a really good reason to be proud of it, and I think it's a part of college football history. To Mark's point, it started that arms race. For better or for worse, it's the reason that we're seeing a lot of these coaches retiring. It's a combination between and sort of quitting. Chris Peterson, Mark D'Antonio. It's exhausting because of the slow climb that began with that meeting. The Shough Center, getting an indoor practice facility in a cold place automatically makes you more attractive to a recruit that's coming from Southern California, because they know they can practice inside if it's going to be really, really cold. And then the SEC recruiting style comes over to Oregon with Mario Cristobal, and it's a whole confluence of things that are now really creating a different kind of climate throughout college football. And you see it in the results of the kind of coaches that find success and the kind of coaches that pull a Chris Peterson.
Yeah, I think Nick Aliotti said it best. He said when he started at at Oregon, he had a locker room. His office was in the basement of Matt Court in the athletic office, and he had a nail. And they said, that's your nail on the wall. That's where he hung his jacket. That was his nail when he started. Then they went, and he is the defensive coordinator in the brand new spaceship. And they're like, here's your office. You've got classrooms. You've got all this stuff. It's digital, everything else. He started with a nail.
That's amazing. That's amazing. How long ago was that?
That was in the 80s.
80s.
So, and again, work your way up, see the whole change. And, you know, how proud is a guy like that? He gets to come back on the set as a Pac-12 network and be treated like royalty now. So pretty cool.
Hopefully it wasn't a rusty nail. At least a brand new, nice shiny nail.
Yeah.
Matt Court right now, and I hope that's not the next thing to get torn down. I know you don't want to talk about basketball, but it's about the change. It's about the facilities. Then that might be the next thing in that block to be targeted, as its neighbor Hayward Field was. But the entire to even bring it on back, the culture of Oregon was Nick Aliotti with a nail hanging his coat there, and along with an entire coaching staff that stayed there over the course of 4 decades, pretty much all intact. And that was Oregon football. And so that's why it's kind of been weird in the last 4 or 5 years to really see how much wholesale change happens in and out with Dante Williams, with Prentice Gill, and with Willie Taggart going to Florida State. Oregon felt like it was in its own little silo. It was free of that rat race of coaches going from school to school and assistants getting promoted and poached. But what comes with success and what comes with modern college football is other schools seeing your assistants and wanting to bring them along to bring up that same sort of success that you're seeing. And it's not just the buildings, it's the people in the buildings too. And I think that's why you see Oregon succeed and fail.
And one of the reasons why I drug my feet so hard on the Helfrich thing, you know, it was really difficult for me to rip that Band-Aid off. I was definitely from that era of the, 80s and 90s and, Freedom Bowl, Independence Bowl, early days Rose Bowl. And that was really my identity as a Duck fan. And to then go that whole stretch where you go to the national championship and then just a year or two later, it's like, what? This is really happening. You lose to the Beavs. We were at that game. And then when that whole thing fell apart, I really felt for all those coaches, Coach Campbell and Greatwood, and just all that whole lineage that was all gone. And I really, at that point, really questioned whether or not Oregon could rebuild it. At that point, I really didn't know. I thought, okay, they're going to bring somebody in and hopefully they can put Humpty Dumpty back together again. But I felt like what they had built for all those years was what made Oregon different. And turned out that they actually could rebuild it. And it feels like right now they're on a stronger trajectory and more stable ground than they even were then, which is remarkable to say.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a distinction you want to have going from a national championship game to 4 wins in 2 seasons. It doesn't happen very often, but they've bounced back quickly and made the right decisions since. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. So what we do on a regular basis is bring you Florida State, Ohio State, and Miami live streams each and every week. We have certainly wanted to add a 4th. My idea was to survey across the country and bring on, to date, it's been USC, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, UCF, and now Oregon. Maybe I've missed a couple in there, but we've got live streams coming out each and every day talking college football. So please like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe as we talk college football nonstop here.
Mark, you are the man. Cheers to you, Mark. Voice of college football. Let's go.
We do our best to try to keep it going.
You got to hit that like button, I think. I got to tell everybody to hit that like button. We're halfway through the show. And
there it is. Got to do that.
I don't think you can forget that. Hit like and subscribe and hit the bell. Let yourself be notified when we're back, when Ryan's back, when MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, is back. You got to know.
So true.
It's like I wrote it for him, Ryan. That was beautiful.
Epic, man. You got it rolling.
Always be plugging.
You got it rolling.
Absolutely. That's good stuff. Thank you so much, both of you. Ryan has joined us for a few years. We just found James here in the last few months. Appreciate him joining a number of live streams, both as a member of the chat room, but most specifically as a guest here on the show. Got a question coming in from Greg at G, obviously a Georgia fan. How will Cristobal utilize Noah Sewell since he can play both sides? Want to let people know in the chat who aren't necessarily Oregon fans. We're talking about the second-ranked inside linebacker in the recruiting class, Noah Sewell. So your thoughts about a guy that can play both ways, apparently?
Greg, the answer is yes. James, what do you think?
I completely agree. I've talked to Mark about the possibility of him running a little, or Noah Sewell running a little bit of William Perry action every now and then in short yardage. I think we're really rationally, I think it's safe to say you're mostly going to see him at linebacker. I think it would be an exciting place to be in Austin Stadium if he were ever to come in at the 1 yard line at running back. Or even at fullback. That would be the excitement would be palpable. I think everyone's going to be waiting for that with bated breath throughout his entire career. I don't know if I can absolutely say that will happen. I don't know if I would put money on it, but I would love to see it.
Yeah, I could definitely see it. From every interview I've heard with Mario, at every single question I've asked anybody in and around the program, everybody said yes. And the whole point about that is the potential of what he could bring, because he's super fast and low to the ground at still 6'2", 260. He is moving, and they ran him in the Polynesian Bowl. He played offense there. So he is a load, and I would not be surprised at all to see. I know Moorhead historically goes one running back, but I could see I formation at some point, where he's the blocking back running behind his brother. It could get real interesting. And if they run a power formation with him and Cyrus in the backfield, you're talking about quite a bit of lumber coming at you. He's just such a good football player. I feel like he's kind of one of the most underutilized traits of being so diverse in every single aspect. I feel like this guy could return punts. I think he could also punt. I think he's one of these guys who is so diverse. He's a classic football player. And he's only going to get better. He has just started hitting the weight room. When this kid comes out of the weights after the summer, he's going to be in charge.
I believe we've received a genuine compliment, wink, wink, from Uncle Lou from SEC territory, but he has contributed to the channel, and it is Uncle Lou, and we certainly have a connection. He's had me on his show. He's been over here. Uncle Lou, just if you know Uncle Lou, and probably just about everybody on the stream does, you check him out for college football as well. He's amazing. But he has contributed to live chat, and Uncle Lou's comment, and I'll get it to the screen. And the only reason I don't post those to the screen is because then I lose the rest of the comments when I try to go backwards in time. So Uncle Lou commenting, and again, wink, wink, the Pac-12 is so cute. Bless your heart. This coming to country. What about the status of the Pac-12, guys?
I think it's fine. I mean, it's West Coast football. It's never been the taste of the whole country. Like you said, Mark, we've always had USC for a couple years. They had Washington, 70s and 80s, Washington. Stanford's been okay. UCLA's had their run. Oregon's had their run. But historically, the rest of the country just doesn't look at us the same way that they look at the Big Ten. They look at the SEC, even they look at the Big 12. And I'm kind of okay with it. I mean, I would love to see us win the national championship. Don't get me wrong. I would love to see us in those games. And I think that the Ducks will be there. I totally believe that. But at the same time, there is a stigma for a reason. There's some chances for the Ducks and the rest of the Pac-12 to really make some statements, and they just don't make them sometimes. When Cal beats Ole Miss and that's your best game against the SEC, it's kind of difficult when Oregon has a chance to really, really rough up Auburn in that first game and really make some noise in the SEC. It's like it didn't happen. And then all of a sudden at the end of the game, Auburn wins, and we're like, what just happened? So the idea is that this has happened numerous times. If Oregon would have capitalized on that very first national championship, maybe won another couple one, maybe won another, or maybe been close to another, maybe there's not as much of a stigma. But if it's not USC, the rest of the country really doesn't give the Pac-12 much respect.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Ryan. I was just about to liken it right back to what you were saying about Oklahoma and what you were saying about Oregon. The whole Pac-12 has had those opportunities on the big stage. Some less than probably the SEC, or definitely less than the SEC, though, having those moments to prove themselves. But they've just fallen short time and time again. Washington and Oregon And Stanford honestly came up in some Rose Bowls against a good TCU team, I believe, and
Michigan State,
other than winning Rose Bowls,
Stanford's always underrated.
Iowa, most
or
recently.
Michigan State.
Yep.
Yes. And TCU beat Stanford in that Rose Bowl that TCU won. Correct?
They beat Wisconsin.
I may be wrong.
Wisconsin, that last of the three Wisconsin.
Keep losing.
Yes.
It's all good.
You're on with the voice of college football, James. I got these scores in my head.
Yes, I am. I think
TCU.
I think you do have the scores in your head.
That's certainly
long
not
story short, you took
from
words
me.
right
That's
out of my mouth.
Idiotic. That's useless knowledge is what just sticks to my head.
But at the same
I
time,
love the
being
brain
a Pac-12
computer.
guy, I really enjoy the conference. I really enjoy the matchups we have out here. Oregon State versus Washington, always a barn burner. Even if Oregon State's not playing that well, matchups in the Pac-12 still matter. And so, big game out here, Cal versus Stanford. Other people might not like it, but I'm as a West Coast kid, I still enjoy the heck out of those games. Territorial Cup, all that good stuff, Apple Cup. I still think it matters out here to us.
Especially in that division. The division's been, now Stanford had the one off year. We'll see if they're able to bounce back. But man, when you stack up Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Washington State's been good. We'll see if they can recover post Mike Leach. But it's been a really good division. One of the better divisions in college football in the last 5 years or so. The other thing we need to consider is, Washington and Oregon have had the major game of the non-conference schedule the last 2 years against the SEC and specifically against Auburn. Both of them came up short by
that much. I know that much.
I know. I watched every play of both games, and it could have gone either way. So absolutely. if you're going to go results, the result, the win, the loss is all that matters to a certain extent. But if you're evaluating teams and conferences, you basically say those two teams were even. Right. If anything, Oregon outplayed Auburn for 50 minutes of the game, but they didn't close it out and win. Unfortunately, the issue we have in college football is the lack of quantity of games like that.
Right.
Basically, an Oregon this season or a Washington last season almost completely, especially because of the narrative coming into the season, sinks the entire conference based on one game. And that's the only shot. Right. And that's it.
Mm-hmm. And all summer, that was the narrative on ESPN. All summer, it was all the hype about this game. But if Oregon loses this game, there it goes, to pop the balloon. So if they could have won that game, though, I'm sorry, Mark, they would have lost somewhere along the line. And they would have fumbled it. They would have lost that Washington State game or something.
Really?
And I think that I don't believe they would have gone undefeated. And if they would have, then great. That would have been awesome. My family would have rejoiced it. But then, the week after, life still goes on. You still got to pick up pieces and do it again the next year.
I hate to tell you guys this, that about 3 weeks prior to the Arizona State game, I was on a live stream and I circled that game, and because we were going through the various scenarios of what could happen, and I said, that's the one I'm circling is a big upset. Let's look out for that one.
Always dangerous. But Ryan, I completely agree. You learn from losing games that way. Right. Especially when it's the first game of the year against the best team you'll play all year on the biggest, brightest stage, brightest lights, traveling on ESPN. You learn so much from that. And that's why everyone's saying after they won out, and after losing to Arizona State, or they were poised to be in the playoff. Oh, if you hadn't scheduled Auburn, maybe you'd be in the playoff, no problem. You schedule Auburn every single time. You put your best against best, and that's what Mario Cristobal says, and that's what I completely agree with. You don't learn how to close out a game against Washington State that you have to fight back and win in the last minute. You don't know how to come back against all odds at Husky Stadium in the cold, come back down 14 points. All the momentum is with Washington. You don't know how to do that unless you felt the pain of falling back in that game that you should have won easily against the best team you'll play all year. And you don't blow the doors off Utah. You don't not fear Utah at all. If you go in there scared, we're going to lose this thing we're still going on, this thing we're running on. Everyone says Utah's big. We played bigger. And so that's why I think you schedule Auburn every single time.
And I think that's why you schedule games like Ohio State. I mean, this Ohio State home and home is very exciting. My family's going to Columbus. I mean, we're fired up about it. I think it's one of those things where, again, I was born and raised in this state. I'm not going anywhere. This is the team that my whole family has gone to. This is the school my whole family's gone to. This is my whole, we have where else am I going to go? So I'm rooting for the team I'm rooting for, that I've rooted for my entire life, that my whole family's a part of. And so we are very excited about these opportunities where Ohio State comes to Autzen. Okay, as a kid growing up, you're going to tell me that's going to happen? I mean, we were a sacrificial lamb when I was a kid. We were the team getting paid by Nebraska to go get beat 50-0 in Nebraska. And now we're the school that's having a home and home with the best school in the Big Ten. I mean, that's phenomenal to me.
A lot of people commenting in the chat, obviously, from other fan bases. Dirty Knoll, so there's that Willie Taggart connection there. And it's not necessarily sealing the fates of two programs permanently, but for the next few years, Willie Taggart deciding to go back and take that opportunity, as James talked about a few minutes ago, to get back to Florida, certainly worked out for Oregon and not necessarily for Florida State. So you got to be happy that Tags moved on after one season because it appeared as though he was going to be a decent coach and have a decent stay at Oregon. I don't know that I certainly have been a rough critic on him and his stay at Florida State, but everything that he had done prior to the Oregon year certainly would bode well for his stay at Oregon, but he got the opportunity and he took off, and you land Cristobal.
Yeah, he brought him in, and I can't thank him anymore for doing that. And I wish I could thank him, but he blocked me on Twitter for some reason. So Willie, if you're out there, you're watching this, unblock me. I'll be nice this time. But he brought in an incredible coaching staff that has mostly stayed together, or different pieces have gone in and out. Levitt followed him away and didn't quite work out with Cristobal as that 1 and 1A kind of head coach power struggle that was going on there. Levitt, I think, had reason to want the head coaching position, but the players petitioned for Cristobal to take over, and I think it's really been paying off. And certainly those Willie Taggart years, I really lumped that Willie Taggart year with the Mark Helfrich kind of, like, I was holding on just like you, Ryan. He's an Oregon man. In my mind, I was like, Bellatti's gone times where he won 4 games. Rich Brooks went times where he won 4 games. We kept going. We held on. And Rich Brooks is literally, his name is on the field. So I think in my mind, I was like, we're holding on to Helfrich for dear life, and it's going to be Helfrich Arena one day. But it proved in a lot of ways that Oregon sees themselves as a different program than they were in the Bellotti and Rich Brooks years, and which is true for all the reasons why we might want to hold on to the pride and the grit and the charm of the hook on the wall, or the nail on the wall, not even a hook. But it's certainly a sign of the times that we have such an energized guy like Mario here, and Willie brought him in, and so you gotta tip your hat to him.
Yeah, and I was cool to Willie Taggart. I mean, like I said, I was in kind of a state of shock when that whole thing went down, and I didn't know what to do on that deal, like, where to go, and if you go, in-house or out. I mean, if you're going to completely clear house, get somebody completely different and out of a completely different country and with different identity and everything else. And yeah, he had a track record and everything. But, man, it started bad right off the jump. I mean, the first day they got to have the players, the kids went to the hospital from the workouts. I mean, it started off on a bad note right off the jump. And then they were really heavily penalized throughout that whole year. It felt like it was kind of out of control. They didn't really have a lot of options, it felt like, offensively. And coming from where they were with the Chip and Mark Helfrich era with all the crazy offense they were running, it was a really hitting the brakes hard on this one. They did bring in Cristobal, and again, we've said that, man, that was one of the best things Willie Taggart did bring to us. But having him go was a blessing, obviously, because of what happened now. Hopefully the best for him. I wish no ill on him, because I think actually, he's a fairly decent guy. Every time I had a chance to be anywhere close to him and shake his hand or whatever, very decent guy. But Cristobal is a different one. I'm telling you, This guy is very, very genuine. You shake this guy's hand, you really feel it. He's very earnest. He is very real. He's very in the moment. It's not like he's looking off to some other conversation while he's having a conversation at you. He's not like he's on his cell phone trying to do something. He is locked in, totally locked. And I could see how when he goes into a house visit, a front room, living room, whatever, dining room, he can really put it on you. I can tell you, when he sits down at the dinner table, I can tell this guy is for real.
What else is for real is the chat room here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So if they don't like somebody, man, I got to protect my guests sometimes because they will let them have it. But you guys are crowd pleasers.
Nice.
Love it.
Getting all sorts of good compliments right here. We got 503 JM, solid guest, Mark, Cheryl. I like these guys, and I've passed a number of other comments and put those on the screen.
So
Luke here would like to see me in some green as well, but not Oregon green. He is commenting that I should be the head coach for Michigan State for some unknown reason.
Hey, maybe you won't quit.
What's that?
Maybe you won't quit like D'Antonio did.
Yeah, maybe I'll keep that thing going. I don't know.
They'll be fine.
Let's look at this 2020 schedule because we talked some unique aspects to Oregon football, facilities, uniforms, the history, the kind of microwave elite status under Chip Kelly, and then coming back from that just here in the last few years after a down couple seasons. The other portion of that is the atmosphere at the stadium. So everybody takes pride, or at least the upper echelon of college football, of the atmosphere. And I hear, I've never been there, would love to be at some point to make that trip up to Autzen and check out a game. But I just hear when there's a big game in town, especially a night game, of course, it's unique. So can you paint us a picture of what that vibe, that feel, that look is all about at Oregon for a night game?
Mark, first and foremost, if you ever have an inkling to come out here, your ticket is on me, my man. Come and sit right with us. Let's go. You are on the house.
Awesome. Well, if we get this channel cranked up a little higher, then I'm going to be all over the place. We certainly, if we can, we'll get to that point.
We'll get the world
We've
tour.
got a lot of faith here. Awesome. Ryan, I will take you up on that. It'll be a great time.
You go on the road.
That's it.
Well, James, you can obviously speak on this as well, but the atmosphere at Autzen is great. At Autzen is great. The fan base is wonderful. For years they've talked about the numbers of different posts and on social media and how many different pages there are dedicated. And Oregon is always on some of the tops of the list of this. So it's a very active fan base. It's a small school, 20,000 kids a year, basically, or just under. It's not a big school, and it's in a small area. It's in a state, again, of 4 million people. And so you're talking about, for the fact of comparing and contrast to California, we get dominated, right? But there's a very, very active fan base. The Oregon fan base is the equivalent, in my mind, of about 2 or 3 schools. And I'm going to go down to the Pac12 championship for basketball, and I'll stay the week down there, and I'll see more Oregon gear than almost anything else. I will see, and of course, I'll be attracted to it, but I'll see there'll be Arizona gear, there'll be USC gear, UCLA, but there'll be tons of Duck gear. And that's just how it goes. Now, at the Rose Bowl, we went down to the Rose Bowl, tons of Wisconsin people, but they all wore the same color. So they all stood out. Versus the Oregon gear, it's all different colors. And the idea is that there's a tremendous amount of Ducks that aren't even wearing Duck gear. Versus Wisconsin people, they're all wearing the same hat with the same sweatshirt. No offense to them. Their branding is great. But the idea is that Oregon is very different on that level. The atmosphere at Oregon is great. The atmosphere, they're selling out the girls' games right now. There's 12,000 people in the arena for girls' games. And if you look at the crowd, a lot of those people, they look like they don't go to any games. They don't look like they go to any football games or other basketball games, maybe a softball game or something, but they don't. So this is a very unique situation in Oregon. The crowd is pumped up. You get people going. You can see the difference. I go to the game at Washington. I go to the game at Oregon State. It's not even close. And Oregon and Washington loves to talk about how loud their stadium is. No way. Like, I've been there. I go there every year. It's like at Oregon, it gets crazy. They pump it. And we went to USC, and the band uses speakers. The stadium's so big, the band uses a speaker. Imagine the Oregon band using a speaker. And it just doesn't happen like that.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
guys, kind of leading into the Ohio State game in week 2. Of course, that highlights the schedule, and that's going to be quite the scene with the Buckeyes in town to take on the Ducks. Of course, they met in the 2014 national championship game, and there you go. And as James reminded me a couple weeks ago when we previewed the schedule, let's not look past the Bison of North Dakota State in week 1, because they have certainly taken down their slew of Power 5 teams in recent years. So as you guys survey the schedule, of course, Ohio State stands out. And that's what led me to, again, the schedule discussion was thinking about Ohio State, Oregon. Wow, that's going to be quite the scene, Ryan.
Oh, it's going to be phenomenal. And like James was saying earlier, that North Dakota State's going to be for real too. I just did a video on that last week. I've been watching tons of tape on them. Their quarterback is for real. They've got real receivers, and the Ohio State game is just upper echelon. I mean, if you don't respect Ohio State, you're just not watching college football. And I know there's some Duck fans. Maybe you're still a little bitter about the national championship game or the Rose Bowl we lost with them or any of the other. I think we're 0-8 against Ohio State. I think the only real win we've had against Ohio State was basketball in 1939 for the championship. So Ohio State's a behemoth. You better respect them coming in, and they're going to want it. You know, second game of the schedule, right when you're warmed up, you've tuned up a little bit. This is going to be a beautiful. It should be right in the middle of the day. Game day should be there. This should just be an absolute showcase for college football of Autzen Stadium. What do you think, James?
Yeah, and I was thinking that the North Dakota State game is a perfect, not total cupcake warm-up for Tyler Shough. He will be tested. There is no doubt about it for that defense, adjusting to a quarterback that will play pretty similarly to, geez, my brain just who is Ohio State's quarterback? What's his name?
Oh, we're talking about Justin Fields.
Justin Fields. Got it. Yeah. He is not unlike Justin Fields in the way that he's mobile and the way that he can throw. But unlike Ohio State, North Dakota State will not be as big for sure. And there are ways that Tyler Shough will be able to adjust to real-time game speed by playing them when they aren't by any means just a regular old FCS team. But I think North Dakota State and Ohio State, in terms of like traveling to Eugene, the atmosphere in Eugene for a back-to-back 2-week stretch is going to be incredible because North Dakota State fans, they will travel. You won't be able to discern them really from Oregon fans because they'll be in green and yellow too. But when I was in town in Eugene going to school and Nebraska came to town or Michigan State came to town, those Big Ten schools, they travel. I know they do. And they're there on Wednesday. They're in the College Bar. They're in Taylor's on Wednesday. They're buying you drinks. And then they're there on Thursday and Friday and bright and early Saturday morning. And they make a trip out of it. And they want to experience the whole thing. And I think North Dakota State's going to be very similar. I couldn't imagine if we and Ryan was talking about how we were the lamb to the slaughter. Oregon was the lamb to the slaughter in so many ways. You come out when Iowa's on the schedule, when Wisconsin's on the schedule, or when you have that opportunity to go to a place like Autzen Stadium. That's going to be a game that you travel for as a fan base. So the Bison fans will be out there for sure. But I can't wait to see the kind of traveling that the Ohio State fans will do because they will show up in mass. And it's going to be a pretty fun week in Eugene.
A number of folks, I just want to mention real quick, Ryan, a number of folks have commented and asked about Dante Williams. Well, keep in mind, so that's a very courteous comment made there, discuss Dante Williams, please, Mark, from Don. But other people are like, what's going on? Why aren't we talking about Dante Williams? Well, let's understand that you've caught the live stream midstream. Therefore, that's why you need to go back after the video posts and watch the entire conversation. We have covered a number of subjects, including Dante Williams. So we've covered that ground. So go back and watch the video after it posts. Go, Ryan.
And make sure to comment when you watch that video again, because these comments over here, they get lost after the live stream ends. Other than you'll see these ones, but you won't see everything going on over there. So when you watch it after it posts, you got to click, comment, like, all that, subscribe, all that stuff, because the algorithm is a mess.
Well, real quick, I'm just going to say something what James said a second ago about the Ohio State people. When Tennessee came in, they were just a sea of orange, and they bought out all the student section area as well because the students aren't in school yet that second week. So I could see Ohio State having basically the whole corner of Autzen, basically almost 1/3 of the stadium or 1/4 of the stadium all red. And then real quick, talking about Don's comment, Dante Williams, this is going to be a huge loss. We said it earlier. It's going to be a huge loss, straight up.
And he can certainly we're gonna miss him, and I hope that the outfall or the fallout from this is minimal in terms of recruits that are coming in and still sticking with Oregon, sticking with everything that Dante sold them in his recruiting pitch. If he was their primary recruiter, I would hope that they would still stick around, and most of them have signed their letter of intent. Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe if they chose to transfer now, especially the early enrollees, they would have to sit out a year.
Go in the portal.
If they chose to follow Dante to USC, who actually had a very small recruiting class, and that was why they were ranked so low. They did not sign that many people. I know it's because they had a young base, but they had a very small recruiting class. It wasn't a normal size, and I think that's why that could be a thing where they have some space in their recruiting class to add some people. But I think overall it is a net loss for Oregon. But I can't imagine that Mario Cristobal hadn't planned on some of his highly skilled and highly talented members of his staff being poached by other schools, because when you're in the SEC, you plan for that sort of thing.
Sure. Mark, what do you think? What do you think of these recruiters having enough power in college football? I think that's a problem.
I think it's a big problem. Maybe a bigger scope than what we got to talk about right now. I would steer us in a different direction, actually, because I keep noticing that, and I don't think this is coming just from Ohio State. I know that it's not just coming from Ohio State fans, and not just in tonight's live stream, but anytime the game's brought up, meaning Oregon, Ohio State, that people are giving Oregon no chance of winning this game. I don't really understand. Yes. Sure. Do I think Ohio State was better than Oregon last year? I thought Ohio State was probably the second best team in the country, but Oregon was one of the 5 or 6 best teams in the country. It's going to be played at Autzen. There's a transition from 2019 to 2020. Obviously, the most notable is Justin Herbert's gone, but my goodness, off the top of my head, do I think Ohio State wins that game like 65% of the time? Probably. But that's 60 to 65% of the time. There's going to be one result, and I would not be shocked in any way if Oregon wins this game.
Yeah, but we're just coming off a game where Oregon beat Wisconsin by 1 point, and they're like the 3rd best team in the pack in the Big 12. You know, the Pac-12 is just, like we said earlier, they're just, unless you win one of these games where you have to turn the tide to get people to talk more positive about the program, and unless you win one of these games like this, you're not going to do it. What do you think, James?
I completely agree. Once again, Oregon needs to earn that respect on a national stage, and the biggest wins in the last couple of years, Florida State, when we blew the doors off Florida State, that was a fun one. That's probably the best win in Oregon history, objectively. Like that is that. But all the other big wins come over Wisconsin and Rose Bowls, and until there's a team and a name like Ohio State or Auburn or LSU that Oregon can topple on a big stage, then I have absolutely no problem with somebody questioning whether or not they can hang with the big names of college football. I won't go. I shouldn't have listed elite teams. I know somebody over there will say something about Oklahoma.
Even Oklahoma, we beat on the flukiest play in college football, one of the flukiest plays in history with that dang onside play. So even
I'm
that
not
one
saying
we
anything. I'm not.
From, right?
We got away with that one. I love it.
All right, guys, we appreciate the Oregon talk. We'll give these guys a second to let you know where you can find their work. Ryan, what you've been working on recently?
Yeah, so my channel is Sports Chat 503. Very simple. I just talk about once a week if I can. I sit in my basement here in Southeast Portland, my man cave, look at the computer and just talk sports. I've done it for years with my friend. My friend now moves out to a LeGrand, so he's no longer with me, so I'm doing it by myself. I go to the games, though. I'm try to be as involved with as I can. I've got a son who's in 8th grade, so I really try to have as much experience for him as possible. We go to all the games, season ticket holder. We go to one game a year on the road. Next year, we're going to go to Arizona for Halloween. It's going to be awesome. Taking that trip to Arizona, I think we can do it this year, James. And then I go, Pac-12 basketball, whatever. I follow the Ducks throughout the whole thing, baseball, track, or whatever. And then really into now the off season again with recruiting getting so much better and the spring game being so much more electric. I used to get the spring game tickets at Bimart back in the day. That's how they used to run it. And so a lot of things have changed over time here at Oregon, and I'm just trying to do what I can for the Oregon community and try to just speak my piece on it. And I get noticed at all sorts of games and whatnot, and it's all fun in games. I'm here for everybody out there. So go Ducks. Thank you guys for watching.
What you got for us, James?
What I got for you? Well, one, I knew Ryan just through his YouTube channel. So if anybody needs to see some Sports Chat 503, go head over there. He is a superb channel. And I knew him even before Mark connected us through this platform. But I am writing for Otts and Zoo. I write about football and Mark's favorite topic, college basketball. And I also love tweeting. I'm a big Twitter guy. If you follow me at Who's the Voss, WHOSTHEVOS. That's where you can follow me there. That's where I'm at.
Actually, Ryan, when you made the reference to the 1939 Oregon-Ohio State matchup, I initially just immediately knew that was the very first NCAA men's basketball championship game.
Yeah. That first one. I mean, so this O doesn't mean 0 championships, people. We do have one. It happens to be in men's basketball. Before they even had a turn, I think it was 8 teams back then. So not quite the same thing as it is now.
All right, guys, we appreciate you stopping by to talk some Oregon football. Would love to have you back here in the next few weeks as we get ready for spring football.
Yeah, it's
absolutely. It's already back. Go Ducks, Mark.
All right, everybody out there. Of course, we will see you soon. We're talking Florida State tomorrow night, 7 o'clock Eastern time.